This is Caraline from Caraline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Thank you, Ken Miller, for joining us today. Ken has got an interesting story, and I love it because you talked about it, a background of addiction and incarceration to having a 7-figure company. And that's a major jump. That's no small feat. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Caraline. I'm excited for this.
Me too. Like, your story is exactly the kind of story that my listeners love. Tell us a little bit about your background and where it all started.
Sure. I was born in 1962. It makes me 62 years old today, or at least this year. Oh. And I was born in New York. My mother was a white teenage runaway, 17 years old in New York City. And my father was a Black married pimp and drug dealer. So the child was mixed. I tell people to this day, I'm Black Irish. That's what I am.
I am too.
Really, yeah.
The same thing.
I'm Black Irish. She put me up for adoption at birth. I was adopted by a white couple. She told me when I met her many years later. And she said I was adopted by a white couple because she wanted me to grow up Catholic. And it shows in my paperwork that I was put back into the system 3 months later. And maybe the tan didn't go away because all she saw me was that first day. So I did 6 years as a foster child, which was really fundamental on how I looked at the world and how I dealt with the world and the defense mechanisms that I acquired to deal with my journey through life. I was adopted by Irene and Sam Miller at age 6. When I was adopted, I could not read, I could not write, I could not tell time, I could not even tie my shoes because the foster homes don't care about that. And they weren't teaching me those things. So I'm in first grade without these skills. My mother taught me how to read. This is my adoptive mother, Irene, taught me how to read that first summer. I remember crying every day, going through phonetic cards, TH, PH, F. And she taught me how to read, and I fell in love with reading. And by second grade, I was reading at the 5th grade level. I was precocious as a child. At age 17, I was a National Merit Scholar. I was accepted to Harvard. I went to Dartmouth College to get my undergrad degree. Unfortunately, I graduated with a degree in fraternity with a minor in drinking. That's what I graduated Dartmouth College with. But I went into the corporate world. I also went to my first treatment center for drug addiction, really alcoholism, and remained sober for 2 years. This is important to my story. And then after about 2 years, I relapsed, and I was to spend the next 21 years homeless on the streets, and also a 3-time convicted felon, spent many years behind bars in state-level penitentiaries, medium custody. And then finally in 2004, I was arrested for sales of a controlled substance. I was sentenced to 6 years in the penitentiary, did 3, and came out with no skills, no capabilities, but here I am today. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a speaker from stages all over the world. I am an author, and I own 5 businesses, and I'm very successful. But more importantly, I like to say to people, I'm a kind and gentle man. That's who I am today. And I am, truly am, but there was a lot in between. So that's just to give you an overview to bring me up to date, and then let's go.
That's amazing. The kind and gentle man, considering the amount of hardship you went through, because each of those different levels of rejection is a damage to who you are as a person. I don't care who it is that goes through that, it's going to hurt. And especially during your formative years, and to have the coping mechanisms that you went through with the drug addiction, because that's what that is. That's pure coping mechanism. That is pure, here's how I'm handling the pain. It's too much for me to handle head on. I've got to find something that takes the edge off. And to go through that, to go through incarceration and then to come out and say, nope, I'm going to do something different. What was that catalyst for you to just completely shift your life around?
September 22nd, 2004, I was arrested. I had been homeless. In fact, I was living in a closet at our boarding house, in a closet in the hallway. And the landlord said, you got to go. I'd been there for about 3 or 4 days, living in there. Me, my 40 ounces of beer, crack cocaine, and cockroaches. That was pretty much all I had. I got out and I called my mother up and I said, hey, can you send me back to treatment again for that would have been the 14th time? And she said, I'll have a ticket awaiting for you at the bus station. I'm in Reno, Nevada. I need to get to Seattle, Washington. So I went out and hustled a $10 rock of crack cocaine. I sold it to the undercover. And when I was arrested, I had a pair of sneakers on, no socks, a pair of shorts on, no underwear, a t-shirt, and those are the sole possessions I owned in the world. That was it, with my crack addiction and alcoholism. The cop arrested me. I had to wait for what they call a paddy wagon because they were doing what they call a sweep of the streets of Reno, Nevada before a big weekend. And I remember I was crying. I was crying profusely. And the cop came up to me worried, why are you crying? Is everything all right? Are you hurt? And I said, and I looked at him, I said, no, I'm crying because I'm going to live. I'm crying in joy because I'm going to live. I can't do me on the streets. I didn't say all that. I just said I'm crying because I'm going to live. I was looking forward, what we call laying it down. I was looking forward to incarceration in prison because I can do prison. I've been there twice before. I can't do Ken Miller on the streets. That's how sad that was. But it was tears of joy, tears of gratitude that there was something. Okay, so we go in September 22nd. October, a month later, it takes 3 months to be sentenced and then go to prison. I'm in jail awaiting sentencing. And I had a conversation with God. I had a conversation with God. It's not so much I had a conversation, I listened to God. And God said, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be without pain, but I will be there. Just believe in me, have some faith in me, and I will walk you through everything. And I've walked through some incredible things since that day. I'm coming up on 21 years, but I've never wanted to use. I've never had an inclination to use. That was removed, but there still was a lot of defense mechanisms. There was a lot of scripts that I had to destroy. There was a lot of things I had to take away the power of words. There was a lot of growth that had to happen over that next, we'll say next 21 years, but really it was that first 5 to 7 years that I did the predominant work. And let me just say this, Caraline, I'm well. I'm not talking from hubris or ego, but I am well. I do life well. I am very successful from external, but I'm a very successful internal. I am not in an adversarial relationship with myself. And I have a relationship with God. And this is probably the most important thing about my relationship with God, is that spiritual entity modifies my behavior. It modifies my behavior and actions because there will be times where I am given a choice. And there's a choice that it is usually of self-will that's inimical to my long-term well-being or to society. And there's one that's God's will. And with my choice to be able to consciously get in contact with God through prayer and meditation, I can make and choose to make and do God's will.
That's amazing. And that level of accepting the shift is such a critical one because so often we get in the way of our own healing because of what's comfortable versus releasing ourselves to the process. I experienced something similar that I'm not terribly religious, but I am very spiritual. I
Mhm.
very much know that feeling you're talking about of like when things are right. I talk about it being in the flow. You can just feel the energy
Mhm.
flow through you and move you down the path. And it's easy in those moments to get freaked out because it's different from what you're used to. And it's uncomfortable. It's outside that comfort zone of whatever, whether they're beneficial or not, those habits are what have been your home and enabled you to get to that point. And so when you're doing something new, it's a leap of faith. And
So,
so it
I'm
took a
sorry.
lot of courage on your part to open yourself up like that and to take that leap of faith. That's amazing.
Yes, because I think about the question, did it take courage to have faith? Yeah, yeah, it did. Because first of all, I've defined all these words. I know what fear is. I know what courage is. I know what faith is. I've defined that for myself. It took years to do this. I've spent a lot of time. I did a lot of time in counseling, just a few years in counseling. Let's say 4 or 5. But more importantly, I had to go into introspection.
Yeah.
And what I talk about many times when I'm working with individuals, and I work with men, is that I said life is like a house. There's a famous book. It's a phenomenal book called The Memory Chalet. Called The Memory Chalet. And what we talk about is like there's a long hallway. You're on the second floor of this house, and there's a long hallway, and on down the hallway there's all these doors, and the door says age 6, foster home. Says age 23, dad shooting mom. I had to deal with that. Says age 18, rape. I was raped by another man. I had to deal with that. But I wasn't willing to go into those doors. I wasn't
Mhm.
willing to go in there, turn the lights on, and look at the set pieces that were in there and how they affected me because of fear. Because remember, whenever I'm manifesting my will in opposition to God's will, because my will is in alignment, congruence with God's will 99% of the time, period. But that 1% of the time when I want to manifest my will is because of two things. One, I'm seeking pleasure, or two, I'm running away from potential pain, which is what's called fear. Fear is the future anticipation or expectation of pain. That's all fear is. Courage is the willingness to accept the possibility of pain. That's all courage is. Courage doesn't mean that the pain's not going to come. And sometimes it doesn't. Have you ever
Yeah.
had the one? Because I've always used this example. You get a message from the boss. Boss says, "Hey, I need to see you on Friday at 10 a.m." And you're like, "Oh my God, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to get chewed out, or I'm going to feel less than." And you go in there in fear, but you have the courage, because there's times where I was like, I quit, when I got those type of messages, especially in my addiction. But you go in there and they're like, "Hey, well, I just want to say you've been doing a fantastic job and we want to promote you." But I
You're
was
like,
willing to accept the possibility of pain. There was no pain. So many times we're fear, especially when we're really fear-based, we see almost life as being is fear-based. I grew up, that was when I was in my addiction, that was my number one feeling. I woke up to fear. That's the first thing I felt after consciousness is I'm in fear. I owe people money. I'm an addict. I can't trust myself. Dot, 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 dot. It was all about fear because I anticipated and expected pain throughout the day. And I got it most every day.
life is like that, though. It's one of those things that you continue to feel the fear and the pain until you decide to move forward and push past it and do something different. And it's almost impossible to do sometimes. It is such a heavy process to take on when you're in the depths of that pain and that fear. But progress is made in tiny little steps. And some days it's just one more tiny step ahead out of whatever that place of fear is. And I've experienced some major comebacks in my life. People always ask me, how do you stay strong? How do you do this? And it's not that it's any easier for me than it is for anyone else. It's that I refuse to stop. I refuse to stop. I always focus on putting one foot in front of the other, either metaphorically or literally. I had an accident back in 2012 that I had to relearn how to walk from. And the doctors said, you know, you're always going to have an inability to walk. That's just going to be the reality. You're probably going to walk with a cane. I don't. I now jump rope. I work out consistently. I'm the one that said, you know what? That narrative is not my story. And I learned to walk again. I had a stroller, a double stroller. I put my kids in it to counterbalance me so that it could support me. And I started off one step at a time. And that is true of so many of the things that I've accomplished in life, is it's one step at a time leads to amazing results if you can just force yourself to continually take one step forward. So
Yes. But yes, you can take one step forward, but are you answering the right question? I speak a lot on this, or I talk to a lot of guys. So when I say I talk to a lot of guys, I've been mentoring for 15 years, and I call it explicit mentoring. I explicitly mentor. It's a value added to the gentleman because it's open-ended, it's free, but I've been doing this for 15 years. And I know I've had positive results because I get the indications from the individuals I work with that they have had positive forward toward their dream or goal. So the reason what you were saying, yeah, you can take a step forward, but I'm a big one that we need to take steps forward answering the correct question. Because you can just grind, you can just do action. Just sometimes I'm working, I'm like, Ken, you're just doing busy work. You're doing the noise. There's a famous book, a very well-known book called The Signal and the Noise. Are you responding to the signal? Are you responding to the noise? I can answer 1,000 questions that have no depth and do nothing positive for me or society. Or I can attempt to answer or find a solution for 1, 2, 3 questions and do something positive moving forward. So again, I'm not pushing back any way, shape, or form of what you said, but what I'm saying is that was one of the key. One of the things I talk about and I teach on is discernment, and discernment as a level past maturity, because I speak a lot on maturity, because we know individuals who are adults that make immature decisions. Okay, as a drug addict, that's an immature decision because it's short term. There's no time horizon. It has a very short time horizon. That's an immature decision. That's what children do. If you have a difficulty with knowing what maturity is, use the antithesis, use the opposite. What is immaturity? How does a 4-year-old think? A 4-year-old thinks about me and thinks about right now, present.
yeah.
It has no time horizon. It's not thinking about retirement. It's not thinking about what college I'm going to. It's not thinking about what can I do for my partner. Dot. It has no time horizon because that's something that comes later as we mature. And then there's individuals who their immaturity is all about self and it's all about short term. That's immature. One of the things. And usually the more mature you get, the longer your time horizon is. But discernment is the ability to choose between or similar opportunities or choices. And that's a tough one for many people. So I've had to work on that also. But the key, again, is going back to what are we solving for? What's the question? Not the noise, but what is the question? And then try to solve for that. And that's what I spent years finding out. What is my fundamental problem? What's my core issue? I know what that is. It's abandonment. It's a sense. My core issue, 100%, is that I was going to die alone, period. That I was going, because I knew I was unwanted as a 4-year-old, because my mother threw me away. That's the only way I can articulate it. I can't understand the human condition, especially the human adult condition. I'm a 17-year-old white female with a mixed child in New York in 1962 from a large Catholic family. It wasn't going to happen. It didn't work like that. My joy and gratitude is that she had me. She had me because my dad was from Columbus, Georgia. That was a crime. He could have been killed for that, impregnating a white female. Killed. And in fact, when I went back to Georgia, it's a great story. I went back, he had passed in 76, never met him. But I went and talked to some of the old timers that knew him. And they were like, he liked them white girls. We had to send him up north. We had to send him up north because he was attracted to white females in Columbus, Georgia in the 40s and 50s. And they weren't playing that. That's history. But that's a door.
Yeah.
I went into all of those doors. And it's a beautiful thing when you understand your whys. You understand your feelings. You understand the reason why you manifested the action or behavior. I know that for me, and for every adverse thing I've done, I understand why I did it. And that's freed me.
So what do you think? You said that you were sitting there on the sidewalk and you started to cry out of joy that you were going to survive. And then you reached out to God.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any other catalyst in that supported your growth? Because that is a major jump. That is an incredible jump.
Yeah. So once that happened, that's October. I go into the penitentiary January 21st, 2005. I've been sentenced to, at that time, I was sentenced to 18 to 72. It means because they always sentence you in months. A lot of people don't know this about prison, at least in the state of Nevada, in most prisons, federal, you're sentenced to months. You're not sentenced to years. They don't say, you've been sentenced to 6 years and 3 months. No, they'll give you the months on the bottom and the months on top. Okay. So I have 18 to 72. And I was thinking in between when I was in jail, what am I going to do differently? Because this is what I said. If I come out of the penitentiary, I knew I'd get out one day. The same person that I am going in, I'm going to have the same results. I'd been in the penitentiary. I'd been in that same penitentiary a couple of years before. So what am I going to do different? And this is, listeners, you can hear this too. There's really only 4 areas that you can work on, and that's spiritual, emotional, physical, and intellectual. And I needed work on all of them. And so I made a decision to work on all of those. So I worked on the intellectual. I started reading. I read 160 books in 1 year. What else I got to do? I'm in a penitentiary. And I love to read.
That is an opportunity where a lot of people would find things to fill their time. Like that is remarkable. That is beautiful.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I wrote down every book. I have every book I've ever read since I went down in 2004. I have it in a spreadsheet. How many pages, how many books? And what was it, 2 years ago, I just got over 1,000. I've done 1,000 books. Because once I got out of prison, I stopped. I didn't read as much. I still read maybe 30 books a year, all nonfiction, 96% nonfiction. There was some Dean Koontz in there. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. So that was intellectual because I was hurting because your brain is not used. My vocabulary was limited. And what I mean by limited, if I took the profanity out, I was probably down to maybe 100 words that I used on the streets. Okay. We did not articulate or use the words like bifurcate or dichotomy. We didn't do that. Or congruence. Nah, wasn't happening. Antithesis wasn't happening. Okay. It was, yo, what up? Okay. That I did a lot of. Yo, what up, my nig? Well, anyway, we did a lot of that. Okay. All right. So then that took care of the intellectual, or that's where I began. And then what I did, my hustle. So in prison, we call them hustles. My hustle, how do I make money in penitentiary? Because I didn't have anybody putting money on what we call my books. So what I did is I wrote letters for illiterate Black men, because everything's racial. And there were, unfortunately, a lot of Black men that could not read or write, especially the older convicts. And so I'd write letters to their girlfriends, wives, and pastors. I remember those are the three groups. Some of them had multiple, but anyway. And I would write, the guy would be 70, 80 years old, might be in there for the rest of their life. And they pay you in stamps. That's our currency, is stamps. Okay. So I did that. Then we got to work on the emotional, and that was a big one on me. Oh, the physical. Worked on the physical. I came in there 165. We call sucked up from smoking crack cocaine and drinking alcohol, and I did very well. I was a power lifter. I came in number 2 and strongest man on the yard. I'm 6'2". I got up to 216 pounds and did very well in powerlifting. So that was easy. Played basketball. That was easy. Played softball. That was easy. So I got the physical back. Again, this is years. And then, but the two toughest, let's go spiritual. Spiritual, I just tried everything. I tried the Islamic, a Muslim is really what it was, Muslim. Went to the Christian, looked at that, even went to a Native American once or twice, tried that. But the key thing is I did read the Bible. I did look at some of the books that were in the library that were spiritually based. And again, I'm already in conversation and I'm going to my anonymous meetings, AA and NA, going to those. But the key one for me, at least in the penitentiary, was the emotional. And this is the key. And we talk about trauma, we talk about damage. I always talk about I was broken. I was broken when I was adopted. I was broken when I went off to college. I was broken when I went into the penitentiary. And how do we put me back together? So I don't use these defense mechanisms, these scripts I have built into me that are inimical to my well-being and society's well-being. And so I go to the counselor, and I remember her, we call them civilian, and I sit down with her. And my biggest problem was my shame. I was shame-based and not guilt-based, because I speak on this. And guilt is I did, shame is I am. And my big shame issue was I'd been a male prostitute. That was my big shame issue, is I had turned tricks. And that's as low as you can get on the streets. There's nothing lower. Well, you could probably be a child molester. Yeah, that probably. But on the streets, people don't usually know. You don't know that until you get arrested and go to prison, and then you're the lowest in the prison hierarchy. But on the streets, a male turning tricks is about as low as you can get. So I had hid that on the streets and in the penitentiary for good reason, but I hid that. But I always knew it when I woke up. That's what I did, and that's what I am. And so anyway, I started talking to her about it, and it was so cool because then she obviously she was a good counselor, and she did not make me feel less than, because that's not what a counselor does. And something I do when I work with my guys, and I'm not a professional counselor, I do mine for free. But you can tell me anything, and I have heard everything. Everything. I've heard everything from murder to child molestation from individuals that I have talked to and have worked with. Okay. And I don't give you an emotional reaction that says that you're less than, because I've heard it all. I've done most of everything. So anyway, then what I did is I took that from that, because that was my main issue, but there was other issues. I had to deal with my mom's shooting. My dad shot my mom 6 times and then came to shoot me. I had to deal with that, and I hadn't dealt with that. Okay. I had to deal with, I was a pimp of teenage girls, 14-year-old girls. I pimped them up and down Seattle, SeaTac, and South Tacoma and all that. I did that. No one else did that. I had hurt people physically. Wasn't cool with it. I had tried to kill someone 3 different times. I had to deal with that. Okay. So I have all these issues that were secrets. One of the big things I talk about is taking away the power of the negative secret. Okay. It is that's those, remember I said, you have a hallway.
Yeah.
And you won't open that door. And so what I could do is grab her hand, open the door, and talk about those things that I saw in that room.
Yeah.
This is what I felt. This is what I did. This was what done to me. Remember, I got raped, which a lot of I'm a black male. I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. At that time, maybe 180. But another black man raped me. But I put myself in that situation, and the guilt that I felt because I had drank and there was drugs involved and I put myself in a vulnerable position. I know what it feels like to take a shower for 2 hours and still feel dirty. I know what that feels. A lot of women, I'm not asking any questions of you, but
No,
a lot of women know what that feels like.
it
And
is.
I know what it feels like. And so when I talk to over 100 prostitutes, easily, because I would just sit and talk with them. I'm one too. Okay, we'll smoke our crack and drink our drink and we'll just talk. Because 90% of them got kids. And hear this audience, whoever's listening, 100% of the street level, I'm talking about street level, prostitutes have sexual abuse, have been sexually abused. 100%. Because I would ask them. Because again, I don't give a default judgment of you. Let's just talk. And I would say, hey, because I'd heard it from a few. And then when I started pimping, I would talk to the girls. How long have you been doing it? Since you're 12? What happened? And then I get the stories. So anyway, I had to deal with a lot. And so what I did is I did it in a safe environment. She came in the room with me holding my hand and we talked, we cried, we get angry, whatever, emotion. But mainly I am a very non-emotional in times of trauma. I show no emotion whatsoever. My mom was shot. I go to the hospital before she gets operated. She's on a gurney with a sheet up to here, and there's blood coming through the sheet from where he hit her. She's just happy I'm alive because he said, I'm going to kill that son of a bitch, Ken. I'm going to go to his job and shoot him too. My dad's telling my mom as he's shooting her. Okay. So she thought I had been shot, and I'm an only child. She adopted me, only child. And she's just happy that I'm alive. When I had gotten a call at work, I got the call from her secretary saying, Mom, Sam shot Irene, Sam shot. I said, okay. Hung up the phone, went to my boss. Hey, do you mind if I take a little time off? My dad shot my mom and she's at Providence. He freaks out because he knew a little bit of my situation. He freaks. Of course, I went down there, grabbed her purse, grabbed her shoes, and she was mad because they had cut her shoes off, and she was mad. She had some nice shoes. Okay. Anyway, I got her shoes, got her purse, and went back to work like nothing happened. And my mom was hurt. She told me years later that she thought I didn't love her. But that's the way I dealt with, because I had dealt with a lot of stuff with my dad already. And that's how I dealt with trauma.
Yeah.
And I was to deal with that. So anyway, this is the key component. I told one person, then I went to a small group setting and shared some things. Then I went to a larger group setting and shared it. Now I talk in front of thousands of people because this is the beautiful thing. I don't care if you like me.
Yeah.
Before I needed you to like me or accept me, whether it's streets, penitentiary, family, public, because I'm afraid I'm going to die alone. Again, that's my core issue. Took me years to get to that. I had to peel away. But I've been in all the rooms. You said it a little earlier. The key component to getting well is understanding truth.
Mm.
It's understanding truth, seeing truth. That is, I cannot emphasize that enough. We spend so much time not wanting to see truth. Okay. We repressed it. No, you didn't. You just choose to not bring it into the consciousness. You cannot, you can read Elizabeth Loftus, you cannot repress a series of events because they're stored different places in your brain. You can do a single, even that's rare, but you can't repress. Oh, I was abused by this person 15 times when I was a kid. No, you can't repress that. It's just not the way memory works. I'm just a big one on truth and understand, but I did a lot of work to get to this point that I'm comfortable.
That's amazing. But what you're doing is revolutionary because Having gone through this process myself, I recently realized I was sexually abused by my father, and I carried a lot of shame from it, but I didn't tie it to anything. I had these intrusive thoughts, but I thought, you know what? My mother and my sister have gaslit me so much about the abuse over the years that I questioned my understanding of everything that happened. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until one of my interviews, and she was outlining how the signs that someone experiences when they've been sexually abused, raped, a variety of things. But and like literally as she went through the list, I was like, that's me. And then she did another one. I'm like, that's me. And she went through the whole list, and every single one of those related to me. And that's part of why you standing up and being so open and honest and standing in your truth is such a gift to give back, because you show others by walking that path that they can do the same. And so many of us grow up hiding the shameful parts because we don't feel lovable. And we're terrified that if we show the shameful parts, people will reject us even further. And so, what you're doing is incredible for people who've gone through a similar path and aren't where you are yet. What do you think is the thing that took you from that place to being so successful as a business person?
So I will tell you why. First of all, I have a tremendous work capacity. I love what I do. I can grind. So let's talk about the grind.
Yeah.
Okay. Grinding is repetitive action in pursuit of a goal that has discomfort. If it doesn't have discomfort, it's just a habit. Okay. But remember that courage and the willingness to grind. I have a willingness to grind. I've been grinding. I come in my office at 6 a.m. I run 5 businesses. Okay. I do have VAs. I have employees. That's great. Okay. But there's so much. And then I do these podcasts because this is my calling. This is my calling, is to speak from the stage. I have a gift.
Yeah.
So when it came time, this is a funny one I always tell people. When it came time, my first vocation was a fundraiser for nonprofit. Okay. And I took to it like duck to water. And people will say, why did you do so well? I was in Alaska, and the largest foundation in Alaska, and I talk in proper nouns, Rasmussen Foundation, approached me and said, we think you're the best fundraiser in Alaska, which to this day, I somewhat push back on. That's their perception. Perception is truth. And we'd like to know, if we help set you up, would you be willing to coach or consult? I still have that business. That was 15 years ago. And I remember saying to them, and I'd only been doing it for a year and a half, and I'm the best in the state, but I had the numbers to prove it. People were like blown away. How does this black guy, I'm the only black guy fundraising in Alaska, as far as I knew. There's only a few African-American, even women, 1 or 2, that were doing it. How is he doing so well? And I tell people this, I have been in sales my whole life, legal and illegal. I've sold drugs, I've sold women, I've sold myself, I've sold corporate for 3M, for Kodak. This is just sales. Fundraising, I hate to say, is sales. I'm selling a feeling, but I believed in what I was doing. I worked for a soup kitchen. I used to be a recipient of a soup kitchen. I had keys to the place, and I would come in literally at 6:30 in the morning and work till 6. And sometimes, I remember once I worked like 20 days in a row. I just loved it. I'm helping to feed and provide shelter to individuals. I used to be there. I was one of them. And then I'm intelligent. I am intelligent. And so I pick up things and I learn best practices. What's the signal? What's the noise? And so that was the first business. And then I've had these other businesses where, again, I have an ability to focus and concentrate and then grow the companies. And so I'm a millionaire. Great. I'm a millionaire. What that does, but let me just say this. I am so glad I'm a millionaire. And the reason I'm glad for it, because it allows me opportunities to help others. Because we have, and I teach this from the stage, we only have capacity in two things: time and money, time and money, time and money. I don't have to work on my business. I'm not getting paid to do this. You can give, when I bill out hourly, it's $300 an hour for my time as a coach. Okay, that's great. But I do this for free. I do this for free. So I'm hoping I'm a value added to your audience. I'm hoping that somebody listens to this and maybe wants me to speak. And I speak sometimes for free. I just need the right reason. I went and spoke in Anchorage, Alaska at SHRM, Society of HR Managers, because they wanted me to talk about hiring ex-offenders.
Wow.
I'll be there.
That's
Cost
awesome.
me $2,000-$3,000. No problem. And then I own the business. I can go pretty much, unless I have another event or another speaking engagement. I'll go when I want to go. I talk to the wife. Do you want to come or not?
That's
And
awesome.
most of the time she does. So Caraline, this is a very interesting. So I teach a workshop on self-esteem. And in the workshop, I tell the audience very simply, I can tell more about your self-esteem by how you take a compliment, not by how you take a criticism, by how you take a compliment. So you saw I took it, I said, thank you. Hey, I agree.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Because I have high self-esteem. But if my self-esteem is externally, you see me as great, whoop, whoop. But if my internal self-talk says, no, you're an imposter. No, you're less than. No, you're not. You don't have what we call efficacy of self. You're not competent to life. That's not in congruence or alignment with my self-talk. And I'll try to deflect. Oh, no, that's not me. Oh, that was the team. Oh, yeah, sure. Can we talk about something? You deflect it because it is painful to have something that's not in congruence with your self-talk. And I can tell a lot of times by how an individual takes a compliment.
That is good. That is really good. I'm gonna let us in on that, because that right there is actionable, and that is incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for this. Has been amazing.
Thank you.
And I love what you're doing. I love your willingness to share your story, because there are a lot of people that will hear this and it will resonate with them, and it will show them a path through the things that they're struggling with. So thank you so much.
I thank you. And one more thing is I wanted to say, I have a book out. If you want to get it, great. If you don't, it's called Becoming Ken. And in fact, just my background real quick. There it is. So it's Becoming Ken. And if you're interested, great. If not, no problem. The other thing is my LinkedIn is Ken Miller 84. And I answer. If you want to contact me, anybody, for any reason, want to ask a question, if you have a concern, something resonated with you, holler at me, contact me, and I will respond 100%. My word is good. And last thing I always do, every time I speak, I want to thank you, Caraline. I want to thank you. Thank you for having this platform for me and others. Thank you for your courage. You've revealed and talked to a couple things today, and I appreciate you sharing your truth.
Thank you.
And again, just the courage to do a podcast. People keep saying, when are you going to have a podcast? I choose not to have the capacity at this time.
You're smart.
Yeah, but you're doing it, and thank you. It has been a value. A lot of times you don't even see the ones that you've helped, but you have helped people with this. So thank you. I honor that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and this was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caraline with 2 A's, adventure.com.